Welcome to the Glenn Mackintosh Show, where we talk everything around eating, physical movement, weight, body image, emotional health, psychological health, behavioral health, social health, spiritual health, existential health, and everything in between. Guys, today I'm really excited. We have Dr. Gina Cleo with us. Gina, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's always great to be here.
And you guys will know, I know Cleo quite well, so I'm going to interchangeably call her Gina, Dr. Cleo, and Cleo.
And you're going to probably get G-Mac, Mac Daddy, all the things.
You're at the Cleo and Mac Daddy show. Let me introduce Dr. Gina Cleo properly, because I need you to know who we're talking to. So, Dr. Cleo is an accredited practicing dietitian and a research fellow at the Centre for Research in Evidence-Based Practice, which we love, at Bond University. After working clinically in various hospitals and private practice, she completed a PhD in long-term weight loss maintenance, which we all know is the name of the game, where she implemented a habit-based, non-diet or exercise intervention to help people achieve a sustained weight loss. Gina, which you'll see if you look at her Instagram, is a total foodie, and she's really passionate about human behaviour, health and wellness, and she's recognised as the only Australian researcher in habit-based interventions for long-term weight loss maintenance. Her research is pretty groundbreaking. It reaches over 3.5 million people, and it is recognised worldwide at over 25 leading medical conferences and over 100 media outlets, including ABC News, news.com.au, The Today Show, Women's Health Magazine, and about a zillion radio stations. It is pretty groundbreaking research, as we'll talk about, and that's pretty amazing, Gina, given that the research is only fairly new.
It is, thank you.
Yeah.
It's been it's been shocking to me, really, because here I am in my little lab doing my research, and then all of a sudden there's just been this influx of interest, which has been really good and a way to be able to get the word out there.
Really good, and when we start to get into the research, you'll see why it's so interesting. I first met Dr. Cleo at, I think it was the Eating Disorders and Obesity Conference.
That's right.
And I think I was chairing the conference, and I ducked into your area because I really wanted to see this. I thought, oh, this looks like an interesting research topic. And it was one of those rare moments where, as someone who's a bit of a research geek, and at an obesity conference, you're kind of used to a lot of, I suppose, the same thing. You know, the outcomes in what we do are not fantastic. So sometimes it's a bit depressing.
It's true.
Yeah. But I remember I jumped into your presentation, and I had really one of those moments where I thought, wow, this person's doing something really different.
Aw, thanks, G-Mac.
Yeah, so it's absolutely true. And that's obviously the reason why your research is becoming so exciting, because there's a lot of people that are having that response in the research world, but also in the public. So we're going to talk about that in a minute, but let me keep introducing you, Dr. Cleo, because I'm not done. There's more. There's more, guys, but wait. So more recently, Dr. Cleo has developed and is currently implementing a 12-month community-based weight loss program centered on habit change to help individuals achieve long-term weight loss success and therefore gain improved health and well-being. And this is being implemented in 6 countries at the moment.
It launched last month and it's just gone ballistic. So
absolutely mental. You're also the academic director for an international coaching company. I want to talk about that briefly, where your role is to ensure that their programs meet evidence-based practice.
That's right. Yeah.
So important, because there's so much stuff that people are doing out there that's not necessarily evidence-based, and it's so cool to have that organisation see the value in having a researcher come and tighten up their programs.
Yeah, it's been such a great thing to work with them and to have, I guess, the creative license to be able to go through all their content and really rip things apart and put things in and go back to the research. It's been awesome. I
bet there's a lot of health professionals, and we do get a lot of health professionals tuning into the show that are really jealous, because I think as health professionals, we look at those programs like, I could make that better. They need to do more of this or less of that. And you're doing that. It's so, so cool.
Thanks.
Look, Dr. Cleo's doing a bunch of cool stuff, but I wanted to let everyone know that you are nominated for the 2018 Emerging Health Researcher Award because of your research passion and the promise of this extraordinary potential to make an important contribution to changing the way that we see weight management, but also health behaviour in general.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So did I miss anything?
No, I don't think so. Thank you.
All right, let me tell you guys what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about Dr. Cleo's main area of research and practice, which is in habits. We're going to talk about what habits actually are, because it's something that we talk about all the time, but I don't know that we all actually know exactly what we're talking about. We're going to get into your research and what we can gain from it. And then we're going to talk about my favourite thing to talk about on the Glenn Mackintosh show, which is the how-tos. How do we make habits? How do we break habits? And some of the insights from your research and practice with people.
Yeah, awesome. Let's do it.
All right. So why don't you tell us? I'm a massive research geek. A lot of researchers all over the world are loving your research. What are some of the key take-home messages from what you've been researching in habits and long-term weight loss maintenance?
I think one of the biggest things is realizing that about half of everything we do is actually habitual, which means it's basically subconscious and we don't even realize we're doing those things. So we have conscious behaviors and subconscious behaviors, and 45% of our behavior is subconscious, which falls into that habits category.
Yep.
But they're also the behaviors we tend to neglect because they're so automatic. We don't really think about them.
Totally.
So when you sit in the car and you put on your seatbelt and it's something you've done automatically, you don't actually have to consciously remember to do that. And one of the biggest take homes was realizing that also our eating and our drinking behavior is also half of that is habitual.
Yeah, so almost half of what we're doing with our eating and movement, we're doing without even thinking about it.
Exactly. So that's why we eat, when we eat, how much we eat. We could eat because of the time of day or who we're with, or because of the size of the plate or how much food is on our plate, and not necessarily because we're actually hungry for it. And I think taking a really close look at those things makes a really big difference, because that's half of the effort. You know, that's half of what we're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. And it sort of seems to me like when I hear you speak and when I look at your research, it seems to me to be a bit of a no-brainer.
Yes.
It's like, why have we not been looking at habits more? Because we hear this all of the time. We talk about behavior change, but obviously behavior change is not the same as changing your habits.
That's right. Even though the words are generally used interchangeably.
Yep.
So we hear people say, oh, my eating habits, but they really probably mean their behaviors.
Yeah.
And I think that might be part of the reason why we have overlooked habits. And habits have only been researched in the last 10 years, which blows my mind.
Yeah.
Considering how much they affect our life and our behavior in general.
And it is something that we do, isn't it? When we start a health kick, or when people start a weight loss plan, they say, I'm going to develop new habits. But so often I would look at what they're doing and say, you're actually just doing something for the goal, which is typically weight loss, rather than actually creating new habits. And I think that's kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the way I would describe your program. It's the goal is actually on creating the habits.
Exactly. And all the benefits and the outcomes are actually just a side effect of forming the habits.
Yes. So it's doing what we often say we're going to do when we start a health kick, is actually just focus on the habits and almost relax about the results.
Exactly. And know that with consistency of those new behaviors, the results will come. They might not come as quickly as we want them, or they might, but it's really not focusing on the results. It's knowing that if you're performing these new healthy habits and you're doing so consistently, you can't go wrong.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So is there anything, Dr. Cleo, is there anything that we need to know about habits? We know that half of our behavior, or around about half, including our eating and our movement, is just habitual. So we're doing it without even thinking about it. We know we've got to focus on that. Is there anything else that we're missing or we need to understand about habits before we kind of launch into this?
Yeah, so one thing to know is a habit has 3 ingredients.
Okay.
There's a cue, a routine, and a reward.
Right.
Habits are always triggered by something. And so, for example, when you brushed your teeth this morning, you were triggered.
I brushed my teeth this morning. No, I did.
You were triggered by your morning routine.
Yep.
A lot of people will have breakfast because they're triggered by the time of day.
So there's always a cue.
It's always a cue.
Yep. Like I'm drinking this coffee at the moment.
Yes.
Whenever I do these podcasts, I don't ask myself, do I need a coffee? It's just the coffee just magically appears.
Exactly.
Yep. Okay.
Now, you'll have a reward associated with that. So whether that be the social pleasure of it or the comfort of having something warm while you're talking.
I'm experiencing it right now. It's all of that, the caffeine boost.
Yes, that's it. So habits offer a reward, and it might be purely a convenience or an emotional release, or it might be anything. But a habit will always be triggered. There'll always be the action, and then there'll be a reward.
That's interesting you say, Dr. Claire, that there's always some sort of a cue, because I think sometimes people don't necessarily think there is. They're like, I'm just doing this. But you're saying there's always a cue.
Yeah.
There's always a routine, and then there's always some payoff for it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And sometimes the cue's emotional, which is where emotional eating can come into it as well.
Got you. Absolutely. So that's interesting. Well, let's keep that in the back of our minds as we continue through this. Now, I've got to ask you, Dr. Cleo, I'm having a little smile as I say this. I started back salsa dancing a little while back, like a couple of weeks ago. And I was in my class and I heard the teacher say, just like anything, you do it for a few weeks and then it's second nature. And I had a little laugh to myself and I thought about our interview. Yeah. We hear this all of the time. How long does it take to make or break a habit? And we hear 21 days.
I'm cringing.
Well, I'm gathering that's not the answer. How long does it take to make new habits? It's obviously not 21 days. And if not, where does that come from? Why do we think that's the case?
I am so glad you asked me this because I feel like I can finally set the record straight.
It's just everywhere. It's one of those really popular myths, isn't it?
So 21 days, it was a research back in the 1960s, and it was actually by plastic surgeons who performed amputations on these patients. And it took about 21 days for these patients to no longer have the sensation of the phantom limb. And so they then thought, well, this will be replicated with all sorts of things. So it took 21 days for these people to realize that they no longer have their arm or their leg. And so it must take 21 days to change a habit. Yeah. And since the 1960s, we have not gone past this, although there's been so much more updated research to tell us otherwise.
Isn't it amazing how something can get stuck in our minds, and it doesn't matter what ongoing research sort of tells us any different? And that is a long bow to draw.
Isn't
From
it?
phantom limb pain going away to developing an exercise routine.
Yeah, and I think maybe part of the reason we've kept it is because it is so much kinder than how long it really does take to change a habit.
All right, well, hit us with the reality then. That's what we're all about, truth bombs. How long does it take to create a habit?
I can't give you a number. And the reason for that is there are two different contributions as to how long it takes. So the first thing is how habitual you are as a person will affect how long it takes for you to change a habit.
Got you. So my habit strength is strong.
You're strong habit strength. So you're quite a habitual person.
Massively habitual person.
So let me give you an example. You'll love this.
We've got two of our team here that are like eye rolling. It's the most rigid person on the world.
Hey, you've been salsa dancing. That's really doing something different.
Guys, exactly.
So my partner, BJ, we were housemates for a year before we started dating about 4 years ago.
Love that.
And I noticed that he would eat chicken schnitzel with a side of lettuce and a whole carrot every single day for the entire year we lived together. But not only that, he would make two, he'd have one for dinner, and then he would pack one for lunch the next day. There was twice that, he ate something else. So even if he'd go out for dinner, he'd still eat schnitzel. And it was quite interesting because I was doing my PhD at the time and he was a case study and didn't even realize that he was. But I was really analysing his behaviour. And when I would ask him why he would eat schnitzel, it was just easy for him to do so. So he has really strong habit strength.
Yes.
Whereas I don't have 2 days the same.
So you have a really low habit strength.
Yeah, I'm really behaviorally flexible. I actually find routine a little bit suffocating. I like flexibility and spontaneity. And so,
that's interesting, Gina, because since looking at some of your research and I've been following you for a little while now, I've been asking this question of my clients, and it'd be interesting to hear what you say, because a lot of my clients, and I'm thinking about the audience listening and watching now, when I ask them about their own habit strength, most people can figure it out. Like you asked, we were talking about it, and then I said, I've got a high habit strength.
Yeah.
Your partner has a high habit strength. You have a low. In your experience, can people figure that out?
Generally, yes. Although habits are automatic, we don't realize how many habits we do a day. You generally can tell on a spectrum if you are someone who likes spontaneity or someone who likes schedule.
Yep. Yep.
And that's really the range.
That's it. I love that. Yep.
Yeah.
So one of the factors that depends how long it takes for you to create some new, healthier habits is going to be your own personal habit strength.
That's right.
What's the other one?
The other one is how complex the behavior is that you're trying to change.
Okay.
So if I was to say to you, Glenn, take a sip of water every time that you have breakfast, for example, that might only take you 21 days to develop.
Got you.
But if I was to say to you, I want you to do 50 push-ups every morning, you'll be able to achieve that, but it'll take a lot longer for you to feel that that's automatic and would almost feel strange if you didn't do it, because it's a lot more of a complex behavior than having a glass of water.
Yep, absolutely. So it's depending on your personal habit strength or flexibility.
Yeah.
And then also how simple or complex the new behavior is.
That's right.
And so what sort of range do we end up with? Because I can hear our audience going, yeah, got
Give
it.
me
It's
numbers.
not 21 days,
Yes.
but what's the ballpark?
Okay, I'll give you numbers. So it's actually anywhere between 18 days to 254 days.
Wow. So there's a very small chance it might be less than 21 days, but a very large chance it's going to be a lot more.
Yeah. So if you wanted an average, it's about 66 days.
Okay.
So give yourself 12 weeks to repeatedly do something before giving up on it and saying this isn't working.
And I think there'll probably be a lot of people who are watching and listening and thinking like, ugh, that long. But I think that's quite empowering, because I'm sure you've experienced this too. You've got a lot of people in your research, I'm sure, that have done a lot of things and tried a lot of things before unsuccessfully.
Yeah.
And I feel like, especially in the health and fitness industry, we undersell things. We make things seem so easy. And that disempowers people to deal with the reality that sometimes habit change takes a long time. And so I'm sort of saying to everyone that's listening that this information could be quite empowering. And if you're thinking about creating a new habit, think about, well, how strong are my habits? If my habits are really strong, then this might take me a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And if I'm trying to do something that's quite complex, then maybe this is going to take me a little while.
Yeah, that's it. I think one of the comforting things that I tell people who have this reaction of, oh, this is going to take me so long, is understanding that you only really need motivation to start a behavior. And then the more you repeat it, the more natural it'll feel and the more automatic that it will become. So that level of self-control and motivation is really only needed at the beginning.
Right.
And then just with the consistency, it will get easier. It's not like it's going to be difficult the whole time.
Yep.
It gets easier and easier, and eventually it feels strange if you don't do it. If I was to say to you, I want you to pick up the phone but not answer with saying hello, that's going to be really strange for you.
Yeah.
Because you've been saying hello your whole life when you pick up the phone. And that's exactly the same with forming a habit. At the very beginning, it's like, tying your shoelace, for example. When you first learnt to tie your shoelace, your parents had to sing you a little song and you had to really focus on how to do it.
Yep.
And now you're doing it and thinking about something else at the same time. It's automatic.
You just do it automatically.
So it's not hard. It's really just the consistency of it. And it gets easier. Every day you perform a habit, it's easier than it was yesterday.
So great take-home message. Every day, every time you do it, every day you do it, it just gets that little bit easier, that little bit less motivation or willpower that you need to keep it going.
That's it. And that's the difference with behavior change. Because you're not building habits, you constantly need motivation and self-control.
Yes.
And we know that it's a fleeting resource, right? We don't have much self-control.
Yeah, you only have it until it runs out.
Yeah, and hence yo-yo dieting, hence why New Year's resolutions will be forgotten by February, because behavior change isn't sustainable.
So let's then get into your research. I want to talk specifically about the research you've done on habit change for weight loss and weight loss maintenance.
Yeah.
What did you do with these guys, and how is that different to the typical thing that most people would do? One of those, like a typical 12-week program, or a, as I call them, lose as much weight as you can and gain it all back with interest program.
Yeah.
How is this program different?
So we recruited 75 people from the community that had excess weight and wanted to reduce that. And we split them up into 3 groups. One group formed new habits, one group broke old habits, and the third group was a weightless control. So in the forming habits group, we basically gave these participants 10 tips to do every day for the duration of the 12 weeks, just 10 simple baby steps.
Yep.
The breaking habits group, they had an even stranger intervention actually, where we were sending them text messages through an algorithm that would give them random tasks to do every day. So things like drive a different way to work, listen to a new genre of music. And the reason that breaking habits works like that is because habits work in a web. And if you break one habit, it sort of breaks the chain. So you've heard the term autopilot. You're kind of just going through the day. You drive the same way to work. You park in the similar spot. You go up and make your coffee and eat the same breakfast at the same place. But if you were to drive a different way to work, you actually create a place for mindfulness. Then when you get to work, you can say, do I feel like a coffee, or am I just having it because that's what I do?
Right. So that breaking of the routine, you're finding creates a mindfulness that then allows people to have more flexibility in their choices.
Yes, and make intuitive decisions.
That was interesting because, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like, from what I read in your research, that the tasks you were getting people to do in this breaking habit group weren't even necessarily tasks that are even related to health or weight.
They weren't at all. And that's what, and it's funny because the participants were, when they came and I sort of explained this program to them, they were like, am I in the right place? I mean, I came for the weight loss program. I'm like, no, this is it. You're in the right place.
Yep.
Because none of the tasks actually were diet or exercise related. They were all about general lifestyle. But it's amazing what happens when people have mindfulness and they break the autopilot. Because like we were saying before, if 45% of what we eat and drink is mindless, then bringing mindfulness into that changes that.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so what were the results? You had the group that had the 10 top tips, which were habits that they were trying to do every day.
Yep.
And then you had the group that you were randomly text messaging to do random things to create some mindfulness. They were both doing this for 12 weeks?
That's right. So it was a 12-week program and we measured them. I guess we measured a whole lot of things before and after the 12 weeks. And then we looked at them again 12 months after the research had finished.
So important.
Yeah. So during the 12 week, and I guess that was the difference. It was like, great, we can all, lose weight doing anything, but can we sustain that? And that was my biggest interest. So although some of the participants lost quite a lot of weight during the 12 weeks, I was like, well done. See me in a year, let's see what really happens. Because working in clinical practice before, the yo-yo dieting and the put weight on, lose weight, put weight on again was just such a common occurrence, which is really, it's the reason I started my research in the first place. So what we did then, so after the 12 weeks, the participants lost on average 3.5 kilograms.
After 12 weeks?
After 12 weeks.
Yep, in both groups?
Yeah, both groups were exactly the same, actually.
Wow.
Really interesting, because the 10 top tips was very much centered around diet and exercise tips without giving diet and exercise direct advice. So what I mean by that is packing a healthy snack before you go out, or eating from a smaller plate, being more mindful. Those things were the tips, and they had to really tick them off and do each one of them as many times as they can. So it was 3.5 kilos after the 12 weeks, but the fun part was actually looking at them a year after the study, and to see that the participants had not only maintained their weight but lost further weight a year after the programs had finished was mind-blowing.
That's the mind-blowing part,
That's
isn't
the
it?
part, yeah.
Because it is a bit like, I'm just going to say what I'm thinking. Everyone is out there spruiking their weight loss approaches, and my clients come in the door sometimes almost sheepishly, and they're like, they want to try this new thing, and it might be proven to work in 3 months or 6 months, and it kind of, to me, it means nothing.
Yeah.
It's like, it doesn't, like you said before, you can lose weight a million ways and regain it all with interest, and that's maybe part of the reason why when I saw your research, I had a similar experience to when I saw Peter Stapleton's research on the tapping.
Yeah.
Because it was one of those rare moments where you think, wow, there's something going on for these people to lose a little bit of weight while they're in the treatment, but then it's quite special to then have people continue to lose weight after the treatment's finished, because normally people just they start regaining weight pretty close after it finishes.
And all the participants had come to me after trying more than 10 diets. Some of them were lifetime members of certain organizations where they were constantly going back and forth in this yo-yo. And so it was so amazing to see them after a year and they'd continue to lose. And I'd say to them, what have you done in this time? And most of them didn't even realize that they'd kept losing weight because the habits had become so much a part of their life. They didn't even realize they were still doing those tips or those things that we told them to do.
They'd just become second nature by
habits.
then.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So tell me, and one thing I'm interested in is that these people, no matter how you promoted the research, they were coming in wanting a weight loss program.
Yes.
So you're giving people something that I'm sure if you said to people, okay, a year later from now, you're going to have lost some weight and then lost some more weight without really doing anything, people go, that's fantastic. But what happened when people started the trial? Because obviously a very different thing. And I'm probably asking also for selfish reasons, because this is what we get in our 12-month transformation program. The first workshop, people are like, what?
Yeah.
I'm not going to lose. We don't advertise it about weight loss or anything. So but people come in wanting that, and I suppose expecting that. And there's this almost this, oh, really? This is going to actually be about long-term, slow change. Did you kind of get that effect with your research participants?
Absolutely. Yeah. I had the same response where people would go, so where's my meal plan? I mean, you're a dietitian, aren't you? I'm here for a weight loss program. Isn't that what you do? And it's like, yeah, sure. So how many diets have worked for you before?
Yep.
Well, let's maybe explore and be curious with something different. And so there was definitely this, universal shock factor when the participants realized that there was no diet or exercise related to this program.
Yeah, wow.
I think one of the great things is that both the programs had at least one clinical trial prior to mine.
Right.
And so it was really great to show them, hey, this does work. But of course, the weight loss is very modest, and the trials were done in a different population group. So it wasn't completely transferable, but I could say to them, habits affect your life. Let's just explore what would happen if we were to look at this instead of dieting.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. So it was sometimes a bit of a harder sell.
Yeah.
And maybe that's, Gina, why we don't look at habits as much, because it's not as sexy as saying lose 10 kilos in 12 weeks.
Yes.
So it's like let's slowly change our habits over the course of 12 weeks, and then you'll lose a little bit of weight, and then
another year we'll lose a little bit more. Yeah, and that's it. And I think it was really touching into that element of frustration of clients who had yo-yo dieted their whole life. And it is so frustrating putting in so much effort and then putting the weight back on. And so many people have been there. And so I think the turning point for a lot of the participants was telling them, yes, this isn't sexy. I can't offer you 10 kilograms of weight loss in the next 2 weeks. But what I can offer you is that when you lose that weight, although slowly, you will keep it off, and you'll do so the next year and the next year. And it's just that gradual loss each year. You know, imagine in 5 years' time, if you just continue on this pattern, is that not the way you know, what you want to achieve at the end of the day?
It's kind of what I say to our guys is that, you know, the work isn't sexy.
Yeah.
The short-term results are not sexy. But when you look into the long term, that's kind of sexy.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's different.
Yeah.
This is the difference between habits and diets.
Yeah. Fantastic. So let's talk about your research and the group that were making new habits. What do we need to know if we're looking to make some new habits?
Okay, so we talked about the cue, routine, and reward of a habit. One of the most important things to do when you want to create a new habit is to find a cue. So instead of just saying, I'm going to move my body more and be more active, which is a behavior change. And a lot of us say it. And if you did, you'd feel great for it.
I'm going to exercise more. That's
my goal. That's my New Year's resolution. I'm going to exercise more. But how long are you going to feel motivated enough to exercise more? So associating with a cue is what changes a behavior into a habit. So what you would say instead of I'm going to exercise more, it would be something along the lines of, at 7 a.m., I'm going to put on my shoes and I'm going to walk for 30 minutes around the block. So smart then goal. You know, it's a smart goal. So you're triggered by 7 a.m. It could also be, you know, a different time or a place. So another really great cue. My favorite cues are time or place.
Yes. And guys, just to reinforce what Dr. Cleo is saying, since I heard you speak, since the second time when you came and did the workshop for all of the health professionals with us, I remember you talking about cue and your favorite being time and place. And since then, I've used that with my clients. You know, sometimes I'll say, you know, are you the sort of person that, previously I would have said, are you the sort of person that likes a routine or not so much? But I think we all are creatures of habit, whether we admit it or not.
To some degree,
And so now what I say is, okay, let's think of a time and a place that would be good for you, and let's try and lock that in, because your habits form in a web.
Love it.
And if we can create this time and place, then there are so many things you do of a Friday that you don't do of a Monday. You do them without thinking, and your movement or whatever the goal is going to be one of them.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Absolutely. So think of someone who's triggered to have a coffee every morning at work. When that person goes on holiday and that trigger is no longer there, they don't feel the urge to have a coffee. They do so if they want to, but it's certainly not something they do every day. So when you're forming habits, it's really important to find a cue. And the other important thing to know about habits is consistency, not intensity, is important.
Tell me about this.
It's the secret sauce, consistency.
There are going to be so many people who listen to our work, and so many of my clients thinking, did Glenn just pay Cleo to, like, is she like a paid expert?
Do you say this too?
This is stuff I say. But you tell us.
Okay, nothing sexy about consistency, but it's doing small things. If I was to say to you, what can you do right now that you can commit to for the next 6 weeks? It's going to be something that's fairly bite-sized. So I call them micro habits.
Micro habits.
Yeah.
I like that.
So you do something so small. If you want to train for a 10K run, you might literally start by putting on your shoes and doing a 1K run. Or if you're someone that hasn't done any exercise at all. So we had a client recently, never exercised, and he wanted to lose some weight. So one of the things he wanted to do is exercise more. And so I said to him, all I want you to do is put on your shoes every day for the next week. That's it. You don't have to do anything else. Just put on your sneakers. Yeah. He had to find his shoes. It took a couple of days, but eventually he did that. And then naturally he'd walk out to his letterbox, and then it was down the street. And then once down the street felt automatic and natural, he was then able to take that further. And now it feels strange to him if he doesn't walk, which is amazing, because a few months ago he didn't even know where his shoes were.
Yeah. So what do you say to people? Because, you know, we're talking now, we think that's awesome. He's on the way to developing healthier and healthier habits. And it's kind of like they build on each other. So as he's got that foundation of going down the street, then he can start to
layer it up
around the block,
Yeah.
layer it up. I like those words,
Yeah.
layer it up. What do you say to, because a lot of people, you know, if we're you know, we live in this diet culture where it is all or nothing, and it's perfectionistic, and it's the same with our eating as with our physical movement. There are always these extreme goals, and you know, if you're wanting to lose weight, the best, in inverted commas, the best way to do that is through extreme behavior. So there's a lot of people who are thinking, yeah, but getting my shoes on, that's not going to burn many calories, or walking to the end of the street is not going to burn many calories, or it's not even going to get my heart rate up. How did you, or how do you sort of coach people through what I imagine is that natural resistance to thinking, well, this is just a tiny little thing?
Yeah, and that definitely is a resistance, because we want to get out there and feel that heart rate. And I think if you're someone who does do some exercise already, you could take that further. You know, you gauge how small your micro habit is going to be.
Yep.
But what I want to say to them is, you're focusing on your results, and we want to bring it back to focusing on the behavior change.
Yeah.
Which, even if it is just walking out to the letterbox and back, is something that you weren't doing a week ago. And so once that forms into a habit, you've got such a great and solid foundation to then build on that. Because sometimes you come home from work, you're so tired, and there's every excuse in the world for you not to go out for a walk. But if walking is a habit, no matter how you're feeling, you're going to do it, because it feels strange if you don't.
Yeah, isn't that fantastic?
Just focusing on the behavior and the habit rather than the outcome.
Yeah, and that's I think so often we pay lip service to that. Oh, don't worry about the outcome. Oh, how much weight have you lost?
Yeah.
You know, but we really, the goal, it undermines your ability to create new habits.
That's right.
And so you're doing what I think a lot of us say we're doing. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I think so. And I tell people this analogy, which really helps. So try this with your clients and tell me how you go.
I'm writing notes.
So when you think of the brain, there's neural pathways, and neural pathways will fire when you perform behavior. The more you perform a behavior, the thicker the neural pathway becomes. Think of it like a highway.
Yep.
The busier the road, you know, the bigger the road has to get.
Yep.
And so when you give it to them in that way, when you say, hey, you just walking out to your letterbox is actually firing up this neural pathway, making it stronger. It's paving the way for you to be able to do your 10K run.
Yep.
Then they start to actually really value the small wins.
Yes.
And they understand that it is important to start small, but they will get to their goal eventually. It just won't be in 2 weeks, because we're not a fad. It's not a fad.
So it requires some patience, but it is helpful for people to understand that they're actually building new neural pathways. So even if their heart rate's not getting up to a certain amount, or they're not puffing or sweating, or even if they haven't, you know, seen any health benefits from eating more fruit or veggies, they're actually strengthening those highways in their brain that are paving the path to healthier habits.
Exactly. And there's been, I would say, in my experience, an equal number of clients who are wanting things to go quicker and really relieved that they don't have to put in such an intense amount of work.
Yeah.
There are a lot of clients that say, you mean I don't have to cut down to 1,000 calories and I don't have to burn at, however much at the gym every day. It's like, no, absolutely not. This is not what this is about.
There's a real upside.
Yeah. And they feel, oh, I can do this. Okay. I have enough self-efficacy or enough self-belief to walk down the road.
Yeah.
And it actually is really good for building that self-belief in somebody.
Yeah. So guys, self-efficacy, psychologist's term.
Oh, sorry.
And what it means. No, I think it's actually, I was hoping we would talk about this.
Oh, cool.
Because self-efficacy in psychologist language, Albert Bandura, law of self-efficacy basically says self-efficacy is your confidence at your ability to do a specific thing. So I say to people, I have a very high doing psychology self-efficacy. I think I'm pretty good at it. I get pretty good results. I have a very low cooking for 8 people self-efficacy.
Okay.
And one of the reasons why self-efficacy, your confidence that you can do something, is so important is because it's the best predictor of whether you'll actually do it or not. Your self-efficacy and your motivation to do something are inextricably linked.
Yeah.
In my research a million years ago, the correlation between motivation and self-efficacy was 64%.
Wow.
So massive.
Yeah.
Massive.
Amazing.
And what we're sort of seeing is that a lot of people, a lot of people listening and watching, and a lot of people in your research and people in our practice, they've done 5, 6, 7 failed things. So you can understand why there is this lack of self-efficacy, this lack of confidence that I can actually get some results, especially long-term results. But what we're doing here is we're not trying to build self-efficacy in doing the same thing. We're trying to build self-efficacy in actually doing something different.
Hence the relief.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. Okay, so if we want to create new habits, we got to do a couple of things. And so I want you guys out there listening and watching to have a think about this. If I want to create a new habit, I'm going to give myself a little bit of a breather and not expect it to happen in 21 days, depending on my habit strength and depending on how complex the behavior is. And then I'm going to link that behavior to a cue, which is going to then make it have a chance to become a habit.
Yep.
And I'm going to focus on consistency over intensity. And that kind of means focusing on actual habit change rather than the results, which really do happen as a kind of a flow-on effect.
Exactly.
Okay.
And just having the micro habits, starting small and building on that, layering it up.
Yep. And knowing that that is doing something, even if it's not something that's nutritionally important or physiologically important yet, you're creating new pathways in the brain.
Absolutely.
All right. So I suppose those old pathways in the brain are part of the reason why we get stuck in habits.
Yes.
Let's talk about how we break habits. So what did your research tell us about breaking habits?
This is so interesting because, like we were saying before, habits form in a web. And so breaking habits becomes a sequence of events. By doing one thing differently, you then generate a whole new sequence of events that follow on from that.
That so makes sense to me, Dr.
Yeah,
Cleo.
so fun.
As you know, I've got bathroom renovations.
Yeah.
So I've been out of my bedroom, and I've got a new bedroom, and I'm using a new bathroom. And sometimes it's so weird, the mindfulness that's created because I'm not in my habits. I'm like, What do I do now? Oh, actually, I brush my hair now. It's really weird.
Yeah, but you have to think about it.
I have to think about it.
Yeah, because you're more mindful.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're not automatic. Yeah. And that would really frazzle someone who's quite, I was going to say rigid, but I should say scheduled. Like
you could say
habitual.
Obsessive compulsive.
Okay, so there's 2 great ways to break an old habit. I call them restructuring and reprogramming.
Okay, restructuring and reprogramming.
Yeah, so let's talk about restructuring. So because our habits are always cued by something, by restructuring our environment, we actually take away a lot of those cues. So for example, one of my clients used to drive into a fast food chain on her way home from work every day. And she really struggled to stop doing this. And we tried talking about her intentions and her values and her motivation and all of those things, but she really struggled not to stop in there. And then she realized that she was getting triggered by seeing the fast food chain.
Just the sight.
Just seeing
the
it
visual
was her
cue.
trigger. That's right. So she would get, round the corner and think, no, I'm not going to stop in there. And as soon as she'd see it, she'd drive straight in. So I said to her, why don't you just try driving a different way home today? And she did that, and she called me and she said, I didn't even realize, I forgot all about the fast food chain.
Wow. So that thing that was like a magnet that was pulling her into the fast food actually was something that didn't cross her
Completely
mind.
gone because the trigger wasn't there.
Yep.
And so that's
interesting.
restructuring.
It's restructuring. And this is not, because I'm thinking some people will think, okay, isn't that just the cheat's way out or me not using my willpower? But this is just understanding the way that our brains work and how we respond to those habit cues.
Exactly.
And working smarter, not harder.
Yeah, and I think just like performing a habit more increases the neural pathway, the less you do a behavior, the less that neural pathway will trigger.
Yeah.
And so it's really just about creating an environment in your body and your mind that makes it easier for you later on because you don't have this strong habit. I think one thing to remember is when our habits and our intentions are not aligned, our habits will often win.
When our habits and our intentions are not aligned, our habits will often win.
Yes.
That's a great take home.
So trying to fight against a habit is really difficult because intentions using a very intentional part of your mind. It's a very conscious mind, but habits are using our subconscious part of our mind.
Yep.
Those two don't link together.
Yep.
So trying to fight a subconscious behavior by consciously thinking about it, it doesn't work.
It's a low percentage move.
It's not going to work.
Yep.
And so restructuring, yes, it's cheating, but it's only doing so until that habit has really died.
Yep.
And then no doubt you can then drive past the fast food chain and not feel triggered.
Yep. Okay. So what you're saying is in the same way that there is a strengthening of those neural pathways and a development of those neural pathways when you're creating a habit, those old habits, once we stop doing them, those neural pathways will weaken.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it will get easier.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely gets easier. So restructuring can also be walking into the house a different way. I know a lot of people will come home from work and go straight to the fridge.
Yeah.
So it's walking into the house through a different door or going straight into the bedroom, for example, instead of the kitchen.
Yeah.
Go into your bedroom, have a shower, get changed, just do something different in that moment, restructures that environment. So I
love that.
So that's restructuring. Now reprogramming, going back to cue, routine, reward.
Mm-hmm.
You want to reprogram a new routine from the same trigger.
Same cue.
Same cue.
We're going to do a new routine.
Exactly.
Yep.
So an example of this would be at 10 a.m. you are triggered to have, say, a cookie. You go down to the cafeteria and you get a cookie at 10 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
So when 10 a.m. comes along, you can go down to the cafeteria. You can order a cookie if that's what you want to do in that time. But if you would prefer to have something else, like a piece of fruit, for example, it's using that same trigger, 10 a.m., to go down and consciously order an apple.
Yep. So you're using that finite little bit of willpower that you have, specifically choosing. It's not just a general, I'm going to eat healthier, but I'm going to, say, replace this 10 a.m. cookie with a 10 a.m. piece of fruit.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you use that little bit of willpower to then create the new habit.
Yeah. The thing with reprogramming is the reward has to be the same.
Yes, that's what I was wondering, because there has to be a behavior that is going to be rewarding to you.
Exactly. And if an apple ain't going to cut it, don't have the apple.
Yeah, I can hear a lot of people being like, the apple.
It was such a cliche dietitian thing to say, wasn't it?
I know. We
should have said mango or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so the reward actually could be that you just want to have a break at 10 a.m. That's cool. The apple's going to work for you. But if you are craving the cookie for something else, whether it's a nostalgic thing or a sugar thing, the apple won't cut it. You'll probably eat the apple and then go back for the cookie, right?
Yes.
So the reward has to be similar. You
Yeah.
have to then identify, what is it that I'm actually doing this habit for?
What's the purpose? What's the
purpose?
payoff?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then match a different routine or different behavior to that reward.
Yeah, fantastic.
It's a little bit more complicated. I think reprogramming takes a little bit of thought
It does.
compared to restructuring,
Yep.
but it's really powerful.
And I think it's a great point, Dr. Cleo, that you have to really work to make sure it is something rewarding.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking to stop myself from going to the pub so much.
Yeah.
I ended up, rather than having Saturday afternoon beers, I'm like, okay, Saturday afternoon, I really like going for a walk along the river, but going for a walk along the river is nowhere near as fun as having beer with my mates.
Yeah.
So what I needed to do was actually book myself these indulgent 90-minute massages, which were kind of comparable.
Yes. And did it work?
Yeah, it worked like a charm.
Amazing.
And my mates say to me, they're like, how can you pay $130 for a massage? And I think, well, you spend
At the
$200 at
beer,
the pub, so it's
Exactly,
like a no-brainer.
And that's it, is that you get so much reward from being at the spa, doing your thing. And so that is going to be something you don't need much motivation for. You want to do that. You're happy to do that.
Yep. So the idea of reprogramming, instead of doing X, do Y, is a good idea, but we have to make sure that Y is going to be fun or give us similar or better to what X gave us. Otherwise, we're in habit change mode. In behavior change mode.
Yes.
And not in habit change mode. So then it's always going to be something that we have to continue working towards forever. And eventually that muscle or the willpower is going to
happen. Exactly right. And it's just not
Fantastic.
enjoyable, forming, and I think changing habits is actually quite fun. It sounds tedious, but once you start doing it, it's great because you can see achievements every week as you're building on it.
Yeah, and it is interesting too when you're doing something a little bit different, or when you're changing the cue. I'm just thinking about my experience of being in this weird space where I don't have my bedroom or my bathroom. Is that other things are different. Like I'm watching less television, and I think it's just I've created this mindfulness. I think, okay, well, this is what I normally do, but I can kind of do anything.
That's amazing. Actually, a lot of my participants said, I'm watching way less television. I thought, I never told you to do that. But because they would do something different, oftentimes it would be, listen to a different genre of music or a different radio station on the way home.
Yep.
And they'd do that, and they'd be just so stimulated by that, doing something different, that they were just satisfied to read a book or do something.
I suppose that's another upside of doing habits-based work rather than doing like a traditional weight loss-based work. It's you can have a bit of fun with it. Less pressure, but more fun.
Yeah, definitely fun. I would say breaking habits is a bit more fun than forming habits.
Got you?
But I think it depends on your individual personality.
Yeah.
You're someone, I think, that would do really well with quite a structured program of forming new habits. Yes. You give that to me, it's not gonna fly for that long. I mean, it will, but it would just take me a lot longer to achieve automaticity where you just feel so natural with doing this new behavior.
So I'm sort of thinking, Dr. Cleo, with your work with the forming habits and the 10 top tips, you've got these 10 tips, and we can post them. We'll post a link to what those 10 tips are, but it sounds like the way you're working with people, it's really, people can take from this and think, well, what habit do I want to create, and just apply these principles to anything.
Yeah, absolutely. The tips were put together based on evidence of what we know works for weight management. But the magic really wasn't in the tips. The magic was in the consistently doing these really small lifestyle changes.
Yep.
And for each person, they're actually going to be completely different. So for me, for example, I know that if I don't have an afternoon snack, I end up grazing before dinner. So I'll be making dinner, and next minute I've had a cheese platter and, a couple of wines because I'm peckish, I'm hungry. Whereas if I have an afternoon snack, that tends to taper that off. And so one of my tips, I guess, that I do is I have an afternoon snack. Now, that wasn't one of the 10 tips as per se, but that works for me.
Okay.
So each person will be different.
Yeah. So I've got a question from some of our Facebook group members.
Cool.
And I think you might have already answered that. So Sarah asks, where do you start with a lifelong habit or an addiction to food? There's so many layers to it. I start and stop with so many different approaches. I'm not winning. Food is a friend and an enemy. I've got so much resistance to tackling this. where do I start? I'm imagining that you're going to say just start with one thing.
I am, yeah. Never try to change more than 3 habits at a time.
Never change more than 3.
It's overwhelming.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. I love that. And then how do we know, this might sound like a silly question, but because this is the work I'm starting to do with clients based on your research and learning from you, is that it's like, let's build a couple of habits. Then when they become second nature, then we will start to go again. Exactly, I love that rule that I'm going to start to remember. I think that's a great take home. Never more than 3 at a time. How do people know when something new has become a habit?
Okay, so you will know when something's a habit when you no longer need to remind yourself to do it.
Okay.
And it would feel pretty strange if you didn't do it anymore.
Yep.
So we call it automaticity. Automaticity works on a scale, and you basically, it starts off at the bottom and then it goes up, and then you hit this point where it's like, yep, this would feel really weird if I didn't do this anymore. That's when you know it's a habit. Yeah.
And then that's when you might move on to layer it up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or even doing a completely new thing because you've already got this set if you're at that goal already. Just
move on to the next one.
Yeah.
I love it. Now, Penny asks, and I think you've already answered this too, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I think that a lot of people will be thinking, okay, yeah, but what are the things that I need to do?
Yeah.
Penny asks, what 2 habits are the most important to work on for long-term weight management and good health? And how do you go about creating those? I think I know what you're going to say.
Yeah. What am I going to say? You tell me.
Are you going to say, you have to look at your individual circumstances and figure out what works for you?
I am. Yep. You're good.
Yeah,
you're good at this. Yeah.
It's not my first rodeo. No, it's so interesting because this is like the work we do with, say, intuitive eating or finding the right type of movement that works for you as a unique individual. We naturally, I think, we want the answers, and it sounds a bit like a cop-out to go, you have to do what works for you, but it's really a reality.
It is.
Yeah. I talk about this this book. It's actually over there called Stretching Scientifically, and I bought it from a guy named Thomas Kurtz. I didn't buy it from him. He's the author. And when I read it, I'm like, okay, what is the best way to stretch to become more flexible? How long? How many repetitions? And in it was about
such a rigid thing to ask. How many repetitions do I need to be more flexible?
Exactly. I'm like, how long? What is the exercise? Are these static or dynamic? If they're dynamic, how many swing throughs do I need to do? But this damn annoying book, and this is why I feel my clients' pain, because I'm naturally pretty black and white. Yeah. A lot of people that I see are, but even if you're not, diet culture creates black and white thinking. People come in like they came into your program. What are the rules? And so we're conditioned, even if we're not naturally that way, when it comes to eating and moving, I think diet culture conditions us to think that way. But this darn book wouldn't give me the answers.
Oh, no.
It was about, Glenn, just you have to listen and see what the effect is on your body. And I think this is the work I now do with people when it comes to intuitive eating. Glenn, what do I eat at this time? Well, we need to look at what your body likes and what makes it feel full and satisfied and energized and not sluggish or hungry half an hour after.
Exactly, yeah.
And this is a similar thing to what you're doing. There's no perfect habits. You chose 10 that made a lot of sense and that were research based, but really people can look at anything that they would like to do.
Yeah, and it's hard to give somebody that answer as well because each individual is completely different. We have different ways of how we're going to respond to food, of how our body metabolizes certain food, of what makes us feel full and what doesn't. I mean, you and I can eat the same meal and I might be hungry an hour later and it's kept you full for a long time. Yeah. That's okay. Our bodies are different. So to be able to tell you eat this and eat that won't work for you. You have to figure that out. I think fundamentally though, eating foods that are more nourishing. So anything that really is just grown, roams, swims or flies, whatever is the natural whole foods and doing so mindfully. If you are eating mindfully, you won't be having ice cream for breakfast because you know that doesn't make you feel good half an hour, 2 hours later, right? So I think fundamentally it's how do I eat more nourishing food and how do I move my body more?
I like that. And it's interesting you should raise those 2 points. How do I eat more nourishing food and how do I move my body more? Because I feel like, and it'd be interesting to get your thoughts, that a lot of people find it harder to break old eating habits than to form new eating habits. And often, I think when you form new eating habits, like eating something that, what did you say? You said that grows.
I just made that up, but
I love
grows,
that.
roams, swims, or flies.
Grows, roams,
Sorry for the
swims, or
veggies.
flies. You heard
Just
that.
say
Sorry,
gross.
veggies. But I love that. Yeah, that's a quotable. Because I've seen research, for example, where a family has been asked, the families have been broken into two conditions. And in one condition, they're told to eat less salt, fat, and sugar. And in the other condition, they're told to eat more fruit, lean protein, and vegetables. And the results were better for the group that were told to eat more.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
I guess taking away from what you should be eating or shouldn't be eating, that mentality of taking something away from you makes you feel deprived of it, and then you kind of crave it more. When you put a focus,
fruit effect,
the forbidden fruit effect, exactly. When you're focusing on putting more into your diet, but more nourishing food, you're naturally going to crowd out some of the other foods that you wouldn't be having, you don't want to be having anyway.
So funny, Jenny, you use those words, because I was doing a video with our mate Lindy Cohen, the nude nutritionist, and that's one of the things she talks about is adding, not subtracting, and she calls it crowding.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Go Lindy.
Yeah, go Lindy.
So, and also, when you're forming new habits, you're essentially breaking old ones as well.
Absolutely.
You're creating a new structure. You're creating a new lifestyle, really, by the end of doing a whole bunch of new things.
Yep.
And so if you're eating more fruit and vegetables, for example, you are going to be breaking habits of eating less nourishing food, if that's the goal that you're wanting to achieve.
That's exactly what they found in that research.
Yeah.
That just by telling people to, or encouraging people to eat more fruit, veggies, lean meats, they ended up having less sugar anyway. So
Exactly.
I love that.
I think it also comes back to, we were talking before about focusing on the habits and not the results. It's what you focus on, right? That's your direction.
Absolutely.
If you're focusing on fruit and vegetables, that's going to be your direction, and adding more of that nourishing food into your body. Yeah.
I absolutely love that. So I feel like you've answered all of our questions.
Oh, good.
Is there anything else that we need to know before we finish up? Because I want to ask you about what's going on for you, because you've got a million exciting things coming up.
Yeah, you know what? I would say that there aren't good habits or bad habits. Habits are neutral. And it's whether those habits are taking us towards or away from our goals that they then need to change. If you think of it, because sometimes people can demonize habits a little bit, especially if they have a lot of habits that aren't serving them.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, we make over 35,000 decisions every single day. And if you had to make each one of those decisions consciously, you would be absolutely spent by the end of the day.
So habits are our friend.
Habits are our friend. Yeah. Habits make our life automatic in a way that we can walk without having to think of every step like we did when we were babies, and we can tie our shoelace while we're doing something else. And so habits are actually a really powerful resource to be able, if they're channeled in the right direction. And also know that whatever stage of life you're in, habits can be changed. It doesn't matter if you're 80 years old or 18 years old.
It's not, you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Absolutely not. No, habits can definitely be changed. Your brain is a muscle. It essentially works in the same way. And the more you use the neural pathways, the stronger they'll get. And the less you use them, the weaker they'll get.
And I think that's sort of a call to people to have a little bit of compassion for themselves, because when you talk about that cue, routine, reward, these habits, they obviously, it's a psychological cliche, but they did develop for a reason. So there is a reason. It's not just that you're lazy or you've got no willpower or you're stupid or whatever it is. And it now might be the case that you just need to redirect those habits.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, I just thought about something, Gina, which I think is really important to talk about, because I get the feeling that I'm talking to you as every time I talk to you, I'm really excited, and this stuff just makes more and more sense every time I talk to you. I'm sure that a lot of people are really excited to get out there and change some habits. So wherever you're watching this or you're listening to this, let us know how you went with changing a habit. Give it a go. Put some of this stuff in practice and see how it goes. But again, I'm mindful that we don't oversell these things. And I was just thinking about, those brain pathways that you were talking about, and they take a while to change.
Yeah.
So what do you say to people who fall down? Because I think falling down is probably a natural part of this process.
Oh, absolutely. If you think about habits are automatic, right? You're sometimes halfway through doing something before you realize you're doing it.
Totally.
And it's just having that self-compassion, like you said, to say, I'm a human. This is something I've been doing for a really long time. I'm not going to break this overnight. And just having that grace to know that habits are going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But that is a part of the process.
It's part of the process. You're not doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
You're not. That's what I say to people. If you're having this 2 step forward, 1 step back, or you're falling down, all that really says to us, people beat themselves up about that a lot, but all it really says to us is that you're playing the game.
You're on track, actually, because that's exactly what you should be doing.
Yeah, fantastic.
And if you weren't doing that, then if you're just gunning through, you're not really changing habits because you're having to use self-control and motivation. And so falling down, expect it, is what I would say. It's
a sign that you're doing a good job.
Yeah, but just monitor yourself. And I think setbacks, I think the difference between people that don't pick themselves back up and the people that do is it's the if, when, and how quickly you get back up.
If, when, and how quickly.
If you're someone who has a setback and then you kind of wallow in this sorrowful place for a while, you've actually wasted a whole few days of not performing this new habit when you could just get back up and do it, even if not as big. So if, for example, if you want to exercise more and you haven't been doing so, then even if you do a 5-minute walk, at least you've still fired off that neural pathway.
Great.
Yeah, just doing a little bit.
Yep. So falling off the wagon doesn't mean you're out of the habit, or it just means you're not yet created that habit, that strength of habit for that particular thing.
But it will come.
Yes. Very cool. Now, I know, because we've talked about this previously, that something that is really important is accountability in creating habits. I remember me telling you recently about my writing, and you said, because I'm writing a book, and you said, Glenn, you got to write every day. And I haven't written every day, but I've come closer because I knew that you were going to speak to me, and I thought, Dr. Cleo's going to ask me how that writing has been going. The accountability is really helpful.
Yes.
So I'm interested to hear about this program that you have with the coaching, because you're basically teaching a group of coaches in the States?
Yeah, well, they're worldwide.
Worldwide.
Yeah.
Yep.
So in our study, we saw that the people that had accountability, and by that I was giving them a phone call each week, lost twice as much weight as the people that didn't have the phone calls.
Yep.
And we know from research that accountability is super important. And I couldn't replicate myself or my research assistants.
You're making $1 million. Yeah,
I couldn't do that. So what we've done is we've created a program called Samsanos, and that means I am healthy in Latin. So it's an affirmation as well.
I wonder what that meant.
Yeah. Samsanos. So I've now trained over 100 coaches around the world, and there's more each week, in the principles of habit change, and we've taught them a 12-month program. And each month they present a new module to their clients. And the cool thing is the coaches are now calling the clients every week, and they're meeting face-to-face on a monthly basis. Mm-hmm. There's also groups or one-on-ones. It depends what the client wants. And it is amazing because the clients have been giving that same feedback. Oh, I knew you would call, and so I made sure I did all my ticks this week. But what's happening is they're really focusing on the behavior change because they don't want to let their coach down. And we know through science that that extrinsic motivation, that doing something for someone else is actually stronger than having that personal accountability. Because if you're going to do something for your own self, it's easy to go, oh, I'll start on the new year. I'll start on Monday because, you can't start any new behavior change unless it's a Monday, right? Whereas if you're doing it for someone else, you don't want to let them down. It's like having a gym buddy.
It's exactly what I was thinking. It's the reason why we have gym buddies. Yep, because sometimes that pull to not let someone else down is more important than the pull to not let us down.
Exactly.
And that doesn't mean, like, your psychologist can be quick to pathologize that. It's like, oh, that doesn't mean that you love yourself enough, but really we're just talking about natural human behavior.
Human psyche.
It's
just how it is. Don't fight it, people. Just roll with it.
Just get support.
Yep.
That's whenever I have clients come in the door and they want to do regular work and build some momentum. I'm a big fan of working with dietitians. I say, look, you really want to be seeing myself or the dietitian at least every week. Yeah.
And that could be just the accountability. You might not even be saying anything that good.
True. I remember one of my mentors would say, Glenn, he said, I could still hear his voice. He said, Glenn, we like to think it is our techniques. We like to think it's all of the studies we read. But half of it is we are just pumping up people's tires.
Yes, and that's great.
Yeah, that's the natural psyche, is that most of us only have about a week in us.
That's true.
And so I think that's a really good take home. Don't rely on willpower to keep going and then wonder why the wheels have all fallen off. Get the support you need. And so we're going to provide links to this because this is something that people can access, this program.
Yep, absolutely.
We'll provide the links for this in the show notes. Is there a website at the moment?
If you jump on samsanos.com
or
you can jump on my website, drginacleo.com. They're both linked straight to there.
Perfect. So samsanos.com. And how do we spell that?
SUM for Mary. SAMOS. Oh wait, I can't. I gotta read it.
I've got it here, but I've written it wrong.
Oh, have you?
I wrote sun as in the sun.
It's some. I should know my phonetical alphabet, but it's SUM. SANOS.
Got you. .com.
.com.
Or you can go to
drginacleo.com.
Dr. Gina Cleo, which is www.ginacleo.com.
That's it. Yeah.
Cool. You can also, while we're connecting you with Gina, because there is going to be a lot of people that are going to want to reach out to you. What's your Instagram handle?
Dr. Gina Cleo.
Just Dr. Gina Cleo.
Nice and easy.
The easiest thing in the world. Follow Dr. Gina on Instagram. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about is coming up, you are creating an online habit change program of your own.
Yes.
So tell us about that.
So the Samsanos program is an amazing 12-month program.
Big program.
Yeah, big program.
Yep.
Some people don't want that huge of a commitment, although I recommend it because they get that one-on-one support.
Yep.
But there's a 12-week program coming out called Habits for Change. And that program will come out in 2019. And it's basically all the principles that we've spoken about, but helping somebody move towards their goals using their habits rather than behavior change.
Fantastic.
So thanks. So again, there's 12 modules and it's everything from mindful eating to movement to the intention behavior gap, why we want to do something but we end up doing something else, and really explaining the mechanisms around that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so
that's so great. So you're really applying this habit change to all of the things that people want to do differently to take better care of their health.
Exactly.
Yep. So again, you can go to Gina's website for that, and we'll provide some links in the show notes to that.
Cool.
Now, Dr. Gina, you got to tell me, because I think I heard on the grapevine you've got two other crazy things coming up, and you told me about one of them briefly, the Habit Change Institute.
Yes.
But then, if we're allowed to let the cat out of the bag, you've got to tell us about the other one too.
Okay, so really briefly, the Habit Change Institute I'm creating for health professionals who are in the field and they're wanting to change health behaviour, but not understanding the difference between behaviours and habits. So really instilling that long-term change into people. So that's briefly the Institute. Now...
And this Institute will be about all sorts of habits.
Yes, it will. Yes, thank you. So it'll be relevant to anything from business habits to relationship habits to, health habits. It's anything really in your life that you want to improve on, but you want to do so long term.
So we'll provide links to that too, because we do have a lot of health professionals that listen to and watch the show.
Well, it's not ready yet, but it's definitely in the works.
So by the time that you hear this, it'll be in the works.
In the works.
And also, I'm going to put it out there. These guys will be having a laugh. Yeah. I think this habit change program is going to be awesome. So I'm going to talk with you later and see if we can organise a sneaky discount for our audience.
Oh, cool, yeah.
Because I think that'd be something that our audience would love to get into. And it's just I think we are doing a little bit of it, more of it due to your work, but there's nothing like learning from the master.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you in advance for the discount you're going to give our audience.
Nice one doing that publicly. I like that.
I thought to myself, should I? Oh, well, we're just talking. Okay.
The last one. So, as you know, and you said it earlier, there's been a lot of media and a lot of interest for what we want to do, but not everybody wants to pick up a medical literature article and read through that.
We're not all research geeks.
Yeah. And so I feel like it's only a natural progression to write a book. And after I finished my thesis, I thought, that's it. I'm never writing
again.
That was 100,000 words done. But there's just been so much interest, and I feel almost a liability to do that. So there'll be a book coming out. I'm not going to put a timeline to it, but I will be writing every day.
And I'll be checking on you.
Yes, I'll be checking on you. So the habit change book will really be just bringing it back to basics. Starting from what is a habit and why do I have it and how do I change it? That'll really be the crux of it. And again, relevant to any behavior change.
Yeah. So if you have liked what we're talking about today, you will love that book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very exciting. It's Gina, not to oversimplify, but with this new approach, it is, when you explain it, it's actually very simple.
It is.
If people can get their head around having that low pressure approach, see it as a bit of fun, what they're actually doing is simpler. And that's the reason why I feel things like non-dieting and enjoyable movement and habit change work better in the long term than what people mainly do. Because if you can wrap your head around it, it's actually a lot easier.
That's very true. It is easier. It is such a relief to not have to do something in extreme, even though that's what we think we want to do. It's really not.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dr. Cleo, for coming on the show. We're so like-minded, and I love speaking to like-minded people, but also people who can extend on what we do. So there's a fantastic gap there that I know that everyone who's listening is really going to benefit from. And wherever you're watching or listening, try to just see if you can break one habit or make one habit using some of the things that you've learned today, and we'll be here to provide you with a little bit of accountability.
Yeah, awesome.